Yeah. So I would say that it sometimes feels like an arms race between us and the authorities. We keep on thinking of newer workarounds, and then they come back to us and then they kind of warn, okay, don't pull this stunt again. So apparently they feel that we found a way to kind of like subvert, to be subversive about it. So I don't think necessarily that it's a case of like, oh, you get to do it at the end of the day, and then they can sort of like take some kind of credit for it, for eventually. See how we censor you and now you become more creative. I don't think the rhetoric is like that so much as like, oh, wow, you found another way, and maybe that's a loophole that we need to plug in the future, right? So it seems to be more like that.
Yeah, I think if I understood Joe correctly, you're talking about these two different modes, right? Pragmatic resistance and creative resistance.
I think it can bleed into one can bleed into the other, right? It's not necessarily like
Yeah, but I think what maybe is not discussed often enough as a possibility is defiance. I think we stay in the space a lot, and then like maybe in that spectrum, then creative resistance is as like provocative as it gets, But what are the potential? What is the possibility, and is there power in outright defiance? Right? Anyone else? Is there a different frame other than like an us versus them way of like responding to these situations or understanding these situations? And then what about do we in not underscoring enough? I think the absences and the silences, then do we allow for the state to get away with see there's free expression because we find other ways to tell the stories anyway. Okay, so who wants to go?
No, I mean, I'm just going to tackle the question that someone over there asked about the death penalty. Because from 2005 with Hung at Dawn until now, I still feel the heat is on the death penalty group of people, right? And I think the same heat is being applied. Whereas I feel that, for example, the gay rights group of people, that heat has been lifted. Yeah, the repeals and everything. So there is some movement there. So I'm just trying to think about all the different so-called spots in Singapore conversation that have been suppressed. And I'm trying to think why are some still suppressed after 20 years, and some are less suppressed. I mean, I've just maybe written down a few. Migrant workers' rights, detention without trial, and the overuse of power by the Internal Security Department. Euthanasia, I heard it surfaced a bit more in recent years and in less trenchant terms, so I feel that has lifted a little bit. And of course, the ongoing war in Palestine, you are on the forefront of that. You probably can have a sense of the weight on you. So, but it still begs the question: why is that penalty still being pressed upon? And I'm just wondering, is the equivalent of welfarism in economic conversation, neoliberal ideology, connecting these two, and having the same no-go zones applied on one end, that same power is being used in the death penalty conversation.
I think not want to say respond to the questions about what they're saying. So is that I think actually if we kind of interrogate what the death penalty is, right, it is first and foremost an exercise of state power, right? The power of the state to take away life, right? And in some ways it's very fundamental to the legitimacy of the system as a whole, but also very fundamentally, a symbol of, this sounds circular, but it is a symbol of its power, right? And I think when that's challenged or when that's questioned, that's where the sensitivity comes from. Right? I think that's one aspect of the answer. I think the other aspect of the answer is about what gets censored and what gets kind of most heavily shut down. Right? I think it's really stories about people's political agency, right? Whether we're talking about people who are detained without trial, right? And you know, and we think about what stories are censored. It's stories of people who are, you know, fighting injustice, who are struggling against the system, who are resisting or showing resilience against power, right? And I think that's what the state's afraid of, right? Because once we learn about the stories, we can learn from them, right? And then we can, in our own sense, exercise our political agency. I think that to me is what fundamentally is being censored here.
It's a story actually. Just to say how you share a story, I shared it on Facebook. I make it public. I don't make my posts public usually, except for specific ones like this. And who should write to me? Shanmugam's niece. Okay? Nearly 20 years later, she said, I write a post, or somebody forwarded it to her, and she fills up the story about what happened to Shanmugam's mother and what happens to his twin sons. Some of you will remember, his twin sons were only about 12, 10, I can't remember, 14, and they were in front of the Istana on their knees begging for mercy. That's the most heartbreaking picture you will ever see, okay? But the niece fills up the story 20 years later, okay? And it keeps alive a memory. It prevents absences that the state would like you to, you know, they want to erase, they want to forget, they want you to forget this story. So it's important to keep the story going. That's what I mean, yeah?
Thank you.
So I'm on the board of Ikamasha, so I know a bit of like the theater company and like arts funding. And I think at the end of the day, like a lot of arts companies rely a lot on NEC funding. And to give you an example, like for Ikamasha, we rely 55% of our revenue is on NEC arts funding. So if we lose that, we die as a company, like completely. So there's a bit of like, even when we think about, okay, let's say we have a play and we want to stage it and there's, you know, we want to put a statement out, we have to think of that repercussions, not just like the play's not going to go. The company's going to completely dissolve, maybe. And there are other companies out there, like Rise, I think, rely less on NEC funding, where they could go, you know, they could say something like that. So it's also a matter of like how much of your funding is kind of tied to the grants that you have. And also at the end of the day, you know, arts philanthropy is really important because that's the only way you can be independent. If not, you're kind of like tied to either, you know, sponsorships by companies or agencies. So yeah, just want to share. That's in a way that's censorship. You can push the needle a little bit, but you can't push it completely just because so much is tied on that. Yeah.
I am curious, I really take the idea of having this kind of fourth way of interacting with censorship or visualizing it, not by speaking against it or by, how to say, agreeing with it, but by actually showing the absence of what would have been had that element of censorship not been there. And I'm curious about how much you have explored the idea of that, or how much that idea has already been explored in different kinds of plays, leaving space to show that this part has been taken away. I mean, this gallery is an example, but maybe adding personal background also when overseas just come, they talk about Singapore and freedom of speech. When you mention a place like displayed at my advisor, so oftentimes they're being taken as an argument of, see, there is free speech here, you can show critical plays, and I wonder also how far that, in a way, neutralizes the purpose of the play itself.
Thank you. Okay, so that was a
thought-provoking session. I'm just wondering about, so we've talked a lot about censorship. Censorship is not unique to the death penalty. So, for example, when we designed the HIV campaign, we were told that red color on the posters is too provocative. Yeah, so it's just, yeah, it's just how, I'm not very sure about the government. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, if we take a step back to look at this censorship, what's really making our government so fiercely protective of the death penalty? Is it really truly for deterrence, or there's a broader picture of not allowing the public to question the authority? I think it's really important to understand that context, because I see in the discussion today is a lot about us against them. Is it possible, so having understood that, who are the stakeholders, why are they so fiercely protective, is it possible, or is there any utility in changing that us against them to something like we are all on the same page of loving our nation, and we just can't, as Singapore, we should not tolerate someone sitting high up there and saying, oh, we deserve to be dead. You know, at the end of the day, we love our country, right? That's why we are all here. Like, can we change that? Us against them kind of thing.
Thank you.
I feel that sense of loss. I'm wondering, doesn't that require some baseline or recognition that this is something you should be feeling the loss over? I don't know, like that you maybe like what was mentioned previously, that sense of empathy and humanity, but when that we have such a lineage of erasure and invisibility, how do we bridge that, you know? And then I guess like sort of like a follow-up to the question, ideally what would happen is that they would try to find these stories or find these like representations, right? And so as artists and activists, how do you navigate making that information like accessible and easy to find, and like the right of, you know, you should be putting like the audiences or whoever should be making their own efforts and, you know, finding out for themselves that like how easy should it be, you know, kind of, yeah.
You know, they believe in Singapore exceptionalism. That's why our leaders all are like uni scholars and graduates, and like who have no understanding of the layman. And we also, instead, also released in the appearance of urbanization of Singapore as a global trade hub, and that Singapore is a small state with constantly vulnerable to threats, outside threats, inside threats, and that's why the pictures of people who've been executed, Shamugan and Jack, they've been banned because these are the people who the state has labeled as monsters, as evil, and yet there are people who try to humanize them, who try to say that these people have stories and they deserve to have their memory kept, which goes against the kind of culture that they want Singapore to unite under, the kind of exceptionalism, the kind of unity where of appearance where like everybody is united under the kind of beliefs that the state wants us to have. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the national interest and security, and I'm in no way qualified to say yes. So like, I say it's just my perspective.
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
Okay. Yeah, I want to talk a bit more about national security interests.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is just my perspective. Yeah, so the state cares so much about image. It's actually